Okay, I'm gonna try to drink a full cup of coffee for you. It's not that easy. And also a little anxiety producing. I have led retreats or done intensive courses for people before, and the students or the retreat participants come and they have been, as one of my old friends used to say, deadlining, just one thing after another, after another, after another, and then finally, apart from the necessary sleeping that they have done, they show up at the retreat and there's nothing left. There's nothing left. They just, it's like yet another thing that they enter into. They're just full. And maybe you can imagine what that's like. Their ability to pay attention, to really participate in what we're doing there, whether it's learning or listening to God or whatever you would do on a retreat, is severely limited because the life that they've led up until that point has been so saturated. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I'm Michael Stewart Robb, and yeah, got to clean up here from my little spills. There's got to be some sort of analogy in that full life, spill your coffee, something, life gets spilled out. I don't know. But today on Pensies, be talking about margin. And this is just another one of those things that I've been, thinking about with respect to the kind of life that one needs to lead in order to grow in Christ. I find that spiritual formation doesn't work for so many people because the way of life that they have, just the average kind of things that they do, just can't sustain it. It's not even a matter of whether they practice disciplines or whether they're attentive to God or whether they're attentive to their life or all that stuff. Just the pace of life that they have, the sort of ways in which they go through their week are just really, really hard, and they need a new kind of lifestyle, not just another retreat, another Sabbath. They need a different way of living so that all of their life is a place where God can enter, the Spirit can enter, and they can be transformed. So today, margin, and I felt almost pushed into doing this. It wasn't really on the first list of topics that I wanted to do for this year, but I have just, I meet people who just don't have any margin, and let me tell you, there are people who are teaching and preaching in churches. They are spiritual leaders of some sort, and their lives up until that point in which you perhaps are listening to them or you're under their leadership just has no space in it. There's just no room whatsoever. And this is just such a common thing. I think that there's a historical side to this, and certainly certain aspects of modern life have led up to this. But it's puzzling to me. It's puzzling to me because it's something that's become common sense to me, that you wouldn't pack it all in your life, that you want a life that's has some space in it, some room to breathe. And I have just, I guess I've been doing this for so long that it may be very difficult for me to try to explain to beginners or intermediate people. I don't know, maybe I'm advanced, I don't know, but just how you would start to do this or do it better, to live with margin. So first of all, what is margin? I kind of came up with a description here. This is my own description. I didn't get this from anybody. Margin is the extra times built into your day when nothing is planned, nothing needs to be done. Okay? So I have emphasized time in my description of margin. There are other forms of margin. You can have margin in other aspects of your life, but I do think that the core of this margin idea is centered on time. Another way of putting it is that margin is a life without hurry. A life without hurry. You just have those times when nothing needs to be done, you're not doing anything. And I think that's something that needs to be a part of your daily, or maybe in a 48-hour period. I can imagine a very busy day, full day, but to sort of go on and on and on like that throughout a week until you hit your Sabbath, your day off, that's not a life with margin. That's not a life with margin. That is a hurried, busied life. I want you to imagine with me a life with margin. I don't just mean, the next few months with margin, or a year with margin, a year with time. I mean, what would your personality be like if for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you were a person that just had space, had room in your schedule for nothing, for being bored, for just being interruptible? What would that actually look like? What would that do for you? I've been thinking a little bit about how I got started into this, and I know one big thing was, or at least an initial thing, was this book by John Ortberg, The Life You've Always Wanted. It's an old book now. I think it came out in the 90s at some point. I read it when I was 19 or 20. It was actually assigned to me, and the chapter that really stood out to me, I still remember it quite well, is one called The Unhurried Life, the Practice of Slowing. And he gets into some things about like having solitude and Sabbath and things like that. But I remember his description of having slow days, of not being rushed around, say, to the supermarket, or driving fast, or getting to go to this and that. And I just thought, oh, that's funny. That's funny. That actually sounds kind of godly. And it sounds like that's the sort of thing that a person who was friends with God would do, what they would be like. And so that thought, it probably didn't affect me a whole lot when I was 19 or 20. Maybe I tried to slow down a little bit, but if I remember those times correctly, I was pretty busy with schoolwork. And I think really where it started to settle in for me was learning to resist the need to get ahead in life. And really for me in my 20s, realizing that I didn't have to go anywhere and be something and have a big career or whatever that would be. I could take a slow and steady pace through life and gradually build in important things, things of character, habits, abilities. But I didn't have to make all of my life happen before I turned 25 or 30 or whatever. And that was a long process, but eventually it resulted in me just thinking it was common sense to just have weeks where I had free time, margin, space, times when I didn't have to do anything. Now there are lots of negative sides to margin. I think that's how a lot of people get into this idea of living more slowly, is they've experienced the negative stuff and they don't want that. Let me just, there's so much to say about this, and I've got this really full cup of coffee here that I need to drink. Positively, what margin will give you in your life is the ability to listen to other people. It will give you the ability to listen to other people, and particularly the people who are closest to you, who live around you in your vicinity. It will allow you to just hear them. And of course, listening to them, hearing them, is the first step towards helping them, loving them, being there for them. Have you ever had a person in your life who listened to you, who actually it looked like when you sat down with them, even if they didn't have, all day, they were there. They were there to listen to you, and they were really listening to you. That was most likely a person who had margin in their life. See, people who don't have margin in their life, that even mentally they become burdened, and they don't have the space to just be there with other people. It's a very, very important skill. Can be a bit of a lost art, but if you've met somebody who's like that, just think about what would it be for you to be one of those people. And it doesn't matter what your job is. And this doesn't mean that you're going to become a counselor or something like that. It just means that you're going to be able to have real conversations with people. And you're not going to have to force your ideas or your thing upon them. You're just going to be able to sort of hear where they're at. And actually that might make the conversation go a lot faster. Now, as for how to get into this, again, I'm not sure. I'd have to think a little bit more about how I got into this myself. I do know that margin is not something that happens to you. I mean, unless you go to jail or something like that, then you probably will have lots of margin, or you break your leg or whatever, something bad happens to you. But let's not hope for that. Let's imagine that you're going to be a fairly healthy, free individual, and you're gonna find margin. You're gonna have to cultivate this. This is something that you're going to have to work on and make a habit in your life. And one of the things that you're going to have to do is say no to a lot of things. Like I said, you're going to have to say no to trying to get somewhere in your life, to becoming or achieving this sort of thing in your career or goal or whatever. You're going to have to sort of say, well, if I'm going to get there, I'll get there when I get there. And learning to say no might just take some review process of learning sort of why you said yes at certain times. And I don't know, having perhaps you need those Sabbath times, those solitude times to sort of recognize what you are doing and to start to prioritize what you should be doing and what's not so necessary to do. The only thing I can really say that sort of probably is pretty universal is if you're going to be a person with margin, you might have to live with less money. Might have to find a way to live with less money. Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Well, tell me how you all are getting on with this. I mean, let me know in the comments, or info@sanctus.institute is a way that you can contact us, and let us know how you're getting on with margin in your life. Whether that's easy for you, whether you've been doing it for a long time, or whether you're just getting started and trying to find a way into it. But until next time, I will drink my now cold coffee. Bye. You're just gonna watch me drink this.